Okay, this is Alderman Pinchuk. It's time to call the Farragut Beer Board for February 11th, 2021 to order. Allison, can you take a roll call for a quorum?
Yes, sir, I sure can. Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett here.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer here.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk here.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin here.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams here.
All right, we have a quorum. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Has the board members have minutes?
Second.
All right, roll call.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes.
All right, the minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda is a beer permit request. Allison, please.
Yes, sir. The purpose of the agenda item is to approve the Class 1 on-premise beer permit for the Farragut table at 10943 Kingston Pike. All the applications and information are in order, and the applicant is on the call with us tonight.
Alderman Pavlin, move to approve.
Mayor Williams, second.
All right. You say the applicant is present?
Yes,
Ken?
Ken Bagden, right here.
All right. If you would, I'd like to get some information from you. Could you?
Of course.
Your name and address, please.
Kenneth James Bagden Jr., 239 Triplet, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37922.
Terrific. Could you tell us a little bit about your business, location, how long you've been in business? A little bit about it.
Yep, we took over Mario's Pizza and Grill. That was established, I believe it's 10, 15 years, but we took it over from a couple in November 2019. About the best time possible because COVID hit in March. So we've been trying to do everything we can to stay afloat, and it was never our plan or business idea to do a beer permit, but we get calls from people, we'd love to come, football, wings, but no beer. So we thought we'd give it a try. My wife runs the store. We have about 5 or 6 employees, depending, a little bit of a struggle to find good help or help in general, but we're managing. We do about 50% pizza, 20% pasta, and the rest of it's just made up of American fried food, wings, hamburgers.
Very good. Board members, any comments or questions? Apparently none. Okay. We'll take a roll call vote. We have a motion and a second.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk.
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes.
All right, congratulations, Ken. You've got your permit. A couple of things I do want to mention. We take the sale of alcohol to minors very seriously, and we want to make sure that you take time to properly train all your employees. We have a packet of information that when you come by to pick up your permit, Allison will give to you to help you with your training. So
Okay, perfect.
make sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our front end employee right now has a Safe Search certificate, and then obviously my wife and myself, once being approved, we were going to go through the process as well. And then looking at past town hall meetings, I did see that there was a sting in 16, and I'd never want to be a part of that. So I'm going to do my best to make sure everyone is well aware.
Terrific. Yes, they do that periodically. So again, glad you're aware of that.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Again, congratulations. Good luck to you.
Hey,
Thank you.
Ken,
And
while we have about a
sure.
minute left. You mentioned I'm a small business owner too. We have a problem with getting the right kind of help. Do you think a program in the high school might be helpful for kids to understand what it means? What do you think?
For sure, 100%. We have a couple high school kids currently, and we get the spectrum of it. Just for me, we can, and I'm in the professional environment as well, we can train a lot, but hard work and dedication, it's very difficult to kind of train that. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what we see, especially with technology nowadays disappearing with where you been, my
Yeah.
phone. Like, come on, you guys, you're
Put
getting
it
paid
down.
to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I think that'd be a great idea and I'd support it as well.
Okay. Good to know. I might be reaching out to you in the future.
Of course. And I expect everybody to try out some pizza. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Good luck to you. If there's no further business, Beer Board is adjourned.
Okay, the time is approximately 7 p.m. and February 11th, 2021. Farragut Board Mayor and Alderman meeting will now come to order. Tonight we'll be operating on Governor Lee's current Executive Order number 71, which shall remain in effect until 11:59 Central Daylight Time on February 27th, 2021, which at that time will expire. In accordance with the executive order, it should be noted that we're operating in compliance with TCA section 4-5-312D by providing real-time live audio video access on Charter Channel 193 and TDS Channel 3. And also is available on the Farragut YouTube channel. Live access to the virtual meeting is made available streaming on www.townoffarragut.org/live stream. It will be recorded and can be viewed later when posted on the Farragut YouTube channel. It will also be rebroadcast a couple more times during the following week. During this period of time, all Farragut citizen agenda or forum comments and questions, along with name and address, should be emailed to comments@townoffarragut.org and should have been received by 12 p.m. the day prior to the meeting in order to be included in the record of that night's meeting. All Farragut Board, Mayor, and Alderman meetings will be public notice per Tennessee state law. Our board meetings are also in compliance with TCA Section 8-44-103 with public notice of our posted agenda prior to each meeting. Pursuant to the governor's executive order, all votes taken tonight will be by roll call vote. Per the executive order, I ask that each member speaking to please identify themselves to permit the public to ascertain the identity of each person speaking. I'll now ask the town recorder to please take a attendance roll call for quorum.
Alderman Burnett,
Alderman Burnett, here.
Alderman Meyer,
Alderman Meyer, here.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Alderman Pinchuk here.
Alderman Pavlin,
Alderman Pavlin here.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams here, and for the record, we ask that all media representatives please respond at this time.
This is Michelle Hollenhead. I'm with the Farragut Press.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Okay, I understand we have a new reporter for the shopper, but she may not be up to speed yet. So thank you. This time, I ask if there's any agenda amendments or changes.
No, sir.
None. In that case, I ask for a motion to approve the February 11th, 2021
Alderman
agenda.
Pavlin, motion to approve.
Alderman Meyer, second.
Okay. I'll ask the town recorder to please take a roll call vote.
Alderman Meyer,
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin,
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett,
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Let the record show the February 11th, 2021 agenda has been approved. Okay, next will be approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes?
No, sir.
None. I'll ask for a motion to approve the January 28th, 2021 minutes as presented.
Alderman Pavlin, move to approve.
Alderman Meyer, second.
Okay, thank you. I'll now ask for a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin,
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett,
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer,
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Let the record show that the January 28, 2021 minutes have been approved by unanimous vote and will be recorded as official minutes of that meeting. Okay, next will be the mayor's report. Again, I'm going to urge everyone to please stay with the physical distancing. It seems to be working pretty well. Also, the face covering when you're around each other. I also urge everyone to please go to the new State of Tennessee website and also, of course, the Knox County website and get signed up for your vaccine. If you do so, you'll be notified like I was. And I actually went to Nova and got my shot. It was very painless, very easy to do. The board, mayor, and aldermen place a very high value on our great staff and volunteer committee members, as well as our Farragut residents. And we're very thankful that Governor Lee has again extended the executive order for all of our virtual meetings for everyone's safety with the COVID protocol in place. We're trying our best to do our daily business, and I want to thank all of our vendors who have been bent over backwards to provide our staff with what they need to keep our town running. We're very fortunate to have this type of long-time working relationship with these vendors. And I'll now at this point yield the floor to the Vice Mayor for her report, please.
I have no report tonight. Thank you, Mayor Williams.
Okay, thank you. Any other alderman have anything to report tonight? Okay, if not, we'll move on with tonight's agenda items. We'll start with a presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020.
Yes, sir. And speaking of one of those vendors who's gone above and beyond for the town and kind of doing our day-to-day operations is Mr. Steve Horton. He's with Whitlock and Company, and all of you got your CAFR booklets last week, and so I hope you had a moment to go over with them. But I'm going to turn it over to Steve and let him give you a little overview of our CAFR. Steve, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. First time I've used this WebEx. So, all right, there we go. Hopefully we're cooking with fire now. Thank you all for having me here tonight to present the comprehensive annual financial report for the town of Farragut for the year ended June 30th, 2020. Do want to apologize for the late in the year, or I guess early in the year, in this case, presentation of this report. We had some obviously COVID issues that hit the firm pretty hard late in the year, so put us in the hole and put us behind. But we're back on track now. So again, just wanted to apologize for that. The auditors that worked on the audit and the audit report were myself, Bob Rankin, and we did have assistance from Karen Edwards and Bob Bean. You guys may remember Bob Bean from years ago. So he's still around and still working part-time. So we utilized him the best we could. So do have some required communications to make. The audit was performed in accordance with GAS, Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, which means that the audit was designed to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. Internal controls were considered as part of the design of the audit. We had no significant findings, no uncorrected mistakes, and no disagreements with management. And to our knowledge, you guys did not consult another accounting firm on anything we discussed. So with that, I'll head into the audit report. Going to start on the independent auditors report on page 11. It's actually not a numbered page, but it is page 11 in your CAFR. Going to start at the top, management's responsibility for the financial statements. Don't want to read these, a lot of verbiage, but I'm just going to spit this out the best I can, most reasonable way. Management's responsible for the fair preparation and presentation of the financial statements in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the U.S. our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on our audit. So given that, the top of page 12 is our opinion. It's an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion, no findings, no items of concern, the best opinion you can get. Skipping over to page 14, the management's discussion and analysis, and that's just as it sounds. It's management's take on the fiscal year. Provides a lot of good information, highlights, financial highlights, and some of the hows and whys of the year. Also find a lot of detail on capital assets and the current and future projects upcoming, and as well as budget information for the year in all narrative form. I'm not going to read through this MB&A, but I do encourage you guys to take a look at that if you haven't already. And it's a lot of good information in there on what's happened during the year and what's to come in the following year. So, moving ahead to the statement of net position, which is page 21. These are the government-wide financial statements that encompass all assets and liabilities of the government, both short-term and long-term. Most significant asset the town of Farragut has, obviously, is capital assets. Capital assets were net of depreciation of approximately $44 million at June 30th, 2020. This compares to approximately $41 million at June 30th, 2019. Total assets were $83.7 million, and that compares to $78.2 million in the prior year. The increase is primarily due to an increase in the investments held by the state of Tennessee local government investment pool, as well as construction in progress, the capital projects in progress. That increased from $2.1 million to $5.6 million. Little detail on what's going on there. The increase, McPhee Park, Campbell Station Inn, Virtue Road improvements, and Anchor Park improvements. So that's kind of the bulk of what the increase in construction in progress was. Liabilities, very minimal, $366,000 last year, increased slightly to $546,000 this year. So if you're looking at your total assets, $83.7 million versus total liabilities of only $546,000, you guys are in excellent shape in that regard. Strength and liquidity. Net position, simply your total assets less your liabilities, and you guys are around $83.1 million in net position. Of that, 44.4 is your investment in capital assets, and 37.9 million is unrestricted, meaning that's available for general spending. Net position is up over last year, approximately 5.6 million from 77.9 million last year to 83.1 million this year. So again, very, very strong net position. Moving to page 22, which is the statement of activities. At the top, and working across the page are the expenses for the year, general government and public works. Then the program revenues, which include charges for service, operating grants, contributions, and capital grants contributions. All that netted together gives you a net expense position of 6.6 million. So those expenses were greater than the revenues, but just down below you've got your general revenues to be added in of 11.9 million. That's your sales tax, state income tax, wholesale beer and liquor tax, and so on and so forth. So that's 11.9 million in revenue to be added back, and you add those two together, and it's $5.2 million net increase to your net position. Excellent year, down slightly from prior year where the net change was 5.7 million, but I think there's obviously some COVID issues that hit probably late in your fiscal year. So dropped it down to 5.2 million versus 5.7 last year. So again, very strong and nothing to be concerned about, I don't think, in relation to your increase in net position. Again, very liquid. Let's see. Moving ahead to page 23 is the governmental fund balance sheets, and this breaks out the previously what we looked at were the government-wide financials, and those included the capital assets and the OPEB and the pension balances. So what we're looking at here on page 23 does not include those items. These are the fund balances. So you've got your general fund, your capital projects fund. Those are the two major funds of the town, and all the other funds were determined to be non-major funds based on our materiality calculations. So they're kind of lumped together in that third column, other governmental funds. And then you've got a total 2020 total governmental funds, and it provides a comparison to prior year. So all in all, the total assets about 39.4 million, up from 37.1 last year. Again, liabilities very minimal. Fund balance 38.9 million, again up from 36.7 last year. So again, very strong year from that perspective. Page 24 is just a reconciliation between the government-wide and the fund accounting balances. So just if you're wondering how we got from government-wide to the fund balances, this page will show it for the balance sheet. And similar to thing on the page 26 is a reconciliation for the statement of revenues and expenditures, which is on page 25. Total combined revenues for the general and capital projects and other funds 14.6 million. Total expenditures 12.3. That left positive excess of 2.2 million for the year. And your transfers in approximately 7.5 million transferred out of the general fund into the capital projects fund, 7.2 million into the capital projects fund, and I believe 175,000 into the equipment fund and 150 into the ADA capital projects fund. So that's what makes up the 7.5 million in transfers out of the general fund. Beginning on page 27 is the budget versus actual comparison for the general fund. This kind of goes into more detail of these statements of activities on the previous pages. This kind of digs down into more detail by department and so forth. So really good detail there. I'm not going to go through all the detail by department or account, but I'm going to skip ahead to page 34. About 3/4 of the way down in the actual amounts column. You'll see, let's see here. Let's move too far, sorry. You'll see excess of revenues over expenditures of 6.4 million. This compares to a final budgeted amount of 3.9 million. So you're over $1 million to the positive on the budget versus actual side. So again, very good and strong position to be in. And regarding the other funds, not going to flip back there at this point, but on page 68, you'll see the budget versus actual for capital projects and the other funds as well, if you want to take a look at those later on. Getting on page 35 are the footnotes to the financial statements. This is just a narrative version of the policies and description of the policies and procedures, the various accounts. just want to point out in note 1 that this gives you a detail of how the financial statements are classified, the government-wide and the fund accounts and so forth, and it describes the various accounting policies and no new policies. I think I said earlier at the beginning, so no new policies were implemented this year, so no change to really footnote 1 from prior years. Footnote 2, which begins on page 46, is again just a reconciliation from government-wide to the fund accounting. It goes into a little more detail so you can kind of get back and forth between those two reports. I guess the other big thing on page 51, the capital assets, is going to be kind of a detail of the capital assets of the town and the additions. There were about $907,000 in additions in the current year. Accumulated depreciation was about $1.3 million. And that allowed beginning capital assets to go from $41.3 million last year to $44.4 million this year. The rest of the report is pretty much supplementary information that provides statistics and schedules related to the town and various information. I encourage you guys to read that, and it's got a lot of good information. As stated earlier, we had no findings or uncorrected errors, no internal control issues, and again, just want to point out that the town continues to be in a very strong financial position and very, very liquid position as well. That is it. Again, just wanted to hit the highlights and wanted to thank Allison and her staff. They're a pleasure to work with and very, very well organized. And if we ask for something, we got it pretty much immediately. So that's always a good feeling. Given that, I will open it up to any questions or comments.
Mayor Williams, no comments, no questions.
Alderman Pinchot, no questions, no comments.
Alderman Burnett, no questions or comments.
Alderman Poblin, I don't have any questions or comments as well.
Alderman Meyer, no comments, no questions.
Okay, sir, thank you. We sure appreciate your work with us. Again,
thank you very much, and again, appreciate your patience with us this year. So
thank you for your efforts, and thank you, Allison, for all of your efforts with this. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And our favorite page is 105, where it says we have no findings.
yes.
I almost said that, Allison. I didn't want to steal your thunder. That's
my
usually where I go
favorite page.
first.
Too, Allison.
I'm like, shit, forget it. We're all good. Well done.
okay, tonight we have on business items, we have 2 business items. We'll start with the first one, approval of bids and award contract 2021-09. That would be the Smith Road Sidewalk project.
Good evening. Yes, this is contract 2021-09, Smith Road improvements. You'll recall this is about half a mile of sidewalk, about 2/3 of which has curb and gutter along the northern side of Smith Road between Everett Road and Andover Boulevard. This project, it's taken us a while to get to this point, but we did open bids on January 28th. We had quite a bit of interest. I'll read through the bids now. Adams Contracting bid $867,879.50. APAC Atlantic bid $624,773.25. Duracap Asphalt bid $986,860.05. Franklin Group bid $857,059 even. McKinnon Construction Company bid $762,756.75. Southern Constructors bid $965,887.50. And Whaley Construction LLC is our low bidder at $622,664.90. Whaley Construction has been involved with a number of our projects the last few years, either as prime or subcontractor. And so staff is pleased to recommend approval of bids and award of contract 2021-09 to Whaley Construction LLC for their low bid of $622,664.90.
Alderman Pavlin, I move to approve.
Alderman Burnett, a second.
Okay. At this point, I think we'll need discussion, and we'll start off with Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, pass.
Alderman Burnett.
Yeah, no questions. Just very glad to see some good, healthy number of bids. So, yeah, sounds good with Whaley.
Any Vice Mayor Pavlin?
I'm just really very happy to finally see this come across and we get to vote on this. This is something that's been in the making for a very long time and something that certainly I worked on very hard with the Andover HOA to make sure that we were getting this project right. And the board has been very patient while we worked through making sure that we got this right for the citizens that live over there in Andover. So I'm very pleased with this, and thank you, Daryl, for your efforts. I know it went back and forth, and I think we're going to get a really good solution here. So thank you. And that's all I have.
And Vice Mayor, I'll just add, there are a few key critical areas in our town that really need to be connected like this one. And so, I applaud your work, that everything you went through and getting people on board to see face to face and to come up with this. So that's fantastic for the north side.
Okay, thank you. Alderman
Thank you,
Pinchot.
Alderman Burnett. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this is Alderman Pinchot. I want to again thank the staff for their work, and I know it's taken a long time to get this approved. And again, Vice Mayor Pavlin, thank you for all your efforts as well. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you. And well, my comment is this is a missing link that desperately needed to be connected. It will actually give us a really nice loop. And at this point, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchot.
Alderman Pinchot, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. And let the record show that contract 2021-09 has been approved. Okay, next will be approval of resolution 21-02, a resolution to provide for Appendix E in the Farragut Municipal Code, an aesthetic plan for vertical utility infrastructure and public right-of-ways. County Farragut applicant.
Good evening. This is Mark Shipley. I'll be presenting this item. And I'm just going to give you a little history of how we got to this point. It's actually been a little over a year in the making, really. Back in January of 2019, the Planning Commission conditionally approved 11 small cell support structures, which is basically just short cell towers that are placed in public rights of ways. One of the things that was brought up during that discussion was that the town, we actually tried to get ahead of the curve a little bit on the small cell issue, and we adopted some provisions in our zoning ordinance in 2017 to try to have some parameters associated with those. And then the state, about a year after that, adopted a Telecommunications Act that nullified certain, or modified certainly, some of the provisions that we had worked hard to adopt in 2017. But one of the things that the state law does provide for is the deference to a community's aesthetic plan, provided the plan doesn't have the effect of prohibiting the service, in this case the telecommunications. service. As it's stated in the Telecommunications Act, the aesthetic plan is pretty broad. It can include a number of things. The town has a lot of elements of an aesthetic plan already before we even looked at developing this plan. And really the key is that you can have an aesthetic plan and apply the provisions as long as you do it in a non-discriminatory manner, and it applies to all comparable construction after the adoption of your aesthetic plan. So one of the things that, a question that kind of came out of the January small cell discussion, because we had a lot of citizen input, for those of you that may remember back at that time. And so the question came up, how can the town try to look at the aesthetic plan and develop a little bit more control over at least the appearance of new vertical utility infrastructure in the community. So I put together a PowerPoint overview in June with the Planning Commission, and I think the board was invited to that as well, where I kind of walked through what is an aesthetic plan, what do we currently have that might constitute an aspect of an aesthetic plan, you know, what considerations will we need to have, what assumptions will we need to make, what are different types of vertical utilities. And one thing that we mentioned is that the town has always required new utilities to be placed underground. So this really would only apply to new utilities that have a vertical component in order to provide the intended service. So like basically the only thing that this plan would apply to is street lighting and telecommunications antenna, because you can't put those underground and then function. So given those considerations, you know, we actually put together a small working group that had some citizen representatives. We had a representative from the Planning Commission and the board, mayor and aldermen, and then we had a representative from LCUB. And what they did was really tried to help the staff and give the staff some input, which was very helpful, particularly from the LCUB representative. And they looked at the draft that we had put together, and we had our first meeting on October 19th. And then I took their comments from that meeting and put together a revised draft and brought it back to them in December. One of the things that really we spent a fair amount of time on was, because again, this is not just associated with telecommunications antenna, it also deals with lighting. And that was just kind of a bigger question of what kind of lighting does the town want to see in different parts of the town over time. So like in your mixed use town center or your mixed use neighborhood, your gateway areas of the town. You know, if you have a road that's widened and all of the existing poles are relocated, is that a time to revisit your street lighting and do something that may be more decorative in certain areas to create a certain effect? If you notice, if you come in from North Shore Road on Concord Road, there's some new street lights that have been added along that gateway portion of the town. We were able to work with TDOT to get that in the project, and I think when those become operational, they're going to make a real impact on people as they enter that portion or exit that portion of the town. I think we're going to get a lot of positive feedback from that. So, you know, the street lights was a consideration. You know, what do you do in residential areas? We don't want to force street lights on residents if they don't want them. But if they have existing wooden poles with the LCUB street light, do you want to go back with a street light like they have on other wooden poles or do something different. So the committee thought that they really needed to get the Planning Commission's input on the latest draft and then also the street lighting considerations. So we had a workshop with the Planning Commission at their December meeting, and basically, they felt like the draft was in pretty decent shape. The components of the plan, which I'll review very briefly later, were really covered pretty much everything that they needed to cover. And that really the lighting issue, for the most part, it should try to match what is out there unless you had an entirely new utility system that went in place. And then that would be a time to give some consideration to alternate street lights like you see there on the screen. But then in their mixed-use neighborhood and mixed-use town center areas, new streets that would be built in those areas should have a decorative fixture, like the bell-shaped fixture on the right there. Those are the type of fixtures that the two commercial developments that are relatively new in our town center, the Farragut Gateway, where the Starbucks is, and then the 35 North, they have decorative bell-shaped poles and fixtures in their parking lots. It's a different application certainly than street lights, but you could still have the same fixture type. So they felt like that would be, unless there was a reason to do so otherwise, that type fixture should be recommended in a mixed-use town center, mixed-use neighborhood. So so we got some good feedback from the Planning Commission, and we took the plan to the commission for a vote at their meeting in January. I put the plan in more of a complete format and basically reviewed the town attorney reviewed the plan, made some comments. There weren't really anything major with the comments that he made. And then I reviewed where the plan would be placed in the municipal code, that it would be a resolution instead of an ordinance. Kind of went through the format of the plan. I tried to make the plan give it headings in different sections so you could find information a little easier, similar to what we did with the sign ordinance. And then I built in some language in the plan that would give the Planning Commission the ability to make some modifications in certain instances if those modifications made sense and they promoted the objectives of the plan, even though it may not follow the plan as it's written. So with all of those things noted, the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend approval of Resolution 21-02. And I guess since this is the first time you all have really seen the whole document, I'll very briefly just go through the sections of the plan and just talk about what the sections address. The first section is the authority section. That's just the authority the town has to have this plan. Then the second section is the need. What is the need? Why did we create this plan? Why did we go through this process? Then we have the assumptions. Those are very important because we basically exempt existing overhead utility systems from the plan. It's only new vertical utilities that would be subject to this plan. So that's one of the assumptions. Another assumption is that the town would obviously continue to require all new utilities to be placed underground unless, as I mentioned, they have a requirement to be above ground in order to provide the service that they're intended to provide. We have Section D as objectives. It just talks about what the plan is trying to do and trying to accomplish. Basically, what we're trying to do with this plan is to minimize the number of new poles that would be placed in the community And if you have a new pole, to make it as discreet as possible and compatible with its existing surroundings as possible. And we'll look at some poles here in just a minute, and I'll talk through the different types of poles that are referenced in the plan. The definition section, that's pretty typical in most plans. Basically, we define terms as we would use them in the plan. So, you know, that's a very important section. The applicability section is basically addresses what kind of projects, what kind of work would fall under the guidance of the plan. And then we talk about the aesthetic plan process. What kind of documents would we require? Having an on-site visit early on in the process, again, to try to head off problems, you know, later on, and to try to work with an applicant to figure out if there's a way to, you know, avoid residential areas or minimize impact to residential areas, things like that. So that's the section. And then we have the pole types and the requirements associated with the different pole types that are identified in the plan. Allison, if you could go, let me look at this. This is going to be on page 8, maybe 2 slides above this one. Yeah. So there's 3 types of poles in the plan. Because when I was putting together the plan, I kind of went around and looked at a lot of poles. I mean, I know I'm pretty crazy, but I think I was really crazy, and people thought I was probably a nut out taking pictures of poles. But I tried to classify the utility infrastructure into categories and then figure out how we want to regulate them. First is just poles that are going to accommodate new vertical utilities, but they don't have to be taken out of the ground. Okay, that's really the most desired type of situation, because we're not really adding additional visual clutter to the community. The second type of pole is where it's an existing pole, but it cannot accommodate the new vertical utility structures that are proposed on the pole. So the pole is going to have to be taken out of the ground, a new pole put back in place, and then the existing utilities that are on the pole re-added to the pole along with the new vertical utility. So that would be similar to the pole on the right. That was a light pole example there. We have some of those along Parkside Drive where existing light poles were replaced because they were fiberglass and they didn't have structural capacity to handle the additional vertical utilities. So they had to be upgraded and completely replaced. So that's what the type 2 pole would address. And then you've got the type 3, which that would be the next slide, I believe, Allison. And that's going to be a new pole in a new location, and that is mostly what was proposed a year ago when the 11 poles were conditionally approved by the Planning Commission. Pretty much all but 2 of those were new poles in new locations. There was a couple of light poles that were replaced, but the rest were this type 3. This is the least desirable type of scenario because it's a new pole in a new location. It adds visual clutter to the community. So with these poles, there's a section in the ordinance that talks about placement requirements. And it does give the Planning Commission some ability to make modifications to the placement requirements, because, you know, every site and every location is going to be a little bit different. And we don't want the document to be so rigid that, you know, it's not manageable. So I went back and added some flexibility in the language in the last draft that went to the Planning Commission in January to do that. So So that's the third type of pole. And then we start talking about lighting. And basically with lighting, if you can go to the next slide, if it's an existing light, it's part of a larger system with lights, then we'll try to go back with a light that's comparable. But if you have a new road that you're putting in, or a new light in an area that doesn't have lights, then depending on the context, that would be something the Planning Commission would be working with the community if it's in a residential area, or determining what kind of fixture they want to see in that area, so that moving forward it has the desired effect. Now, in the mixed-use town center, mixed-use neighborhood areas, we are recommending in this plan that a decorative fixture be required. And that'll have to be something, let's say if this town center at Biddle Farms project, you know, as part of their utility plan, they're going to have to be thinking ahead with their poles and basically putting in place a system that can accommodate likely vertical utility infrastructure in the future, so that they don't end up having to take poles out and put poles back, and basically you know what you have on the front end. So it's really trying to think ahead, provide for a pole that's structurally sound, and that it can accommodate additional vertical utilities. We do require that the new poles, they are all to be galvanized steel. And we'll talk about that here in a minute in relation to the poles, some of the poles that were approved a year ago. The galvanized steel is just longer lasting. It's obviously a more durable product, a stronger product. It's actually lighter than a wood pole for the same dimension. And it allows for the ability to place a lot of the structures, the wiring, the radio equipment, even the antennas within the pole itself. So if you look at the light pole on the left there, go back to that previous one, please. It's a light pole, but it also has at the top what's called a cantenna, which is a telecommunications antenna in a concealment shroud. And so that's at the top. So it's a multifunctional pole in terms of vertical utility. And that's another thing that we require in this plan to try to minimize the number of new poles. We require that any new or replacement pole have the ability to accommodate at least two users. It could be two telecommunications antennas. It could be a telecommunications antenna and a street light. It could be two different types of carriers, AT&T or Verizon or US Cellular, but it does have to have that capability on the front end. So that's something that you know is a big change from what we have right now. So just to talk through real quick, one thing that I did with the Planning Commission was to actually just show a few of the poles that were approved a year ago, some of which have been installed, and how would those be different had this plan been in place. So let's go to the next slide. And these are poles that were approved a year ago. The one on the left is a wood pole in Stonecrest, and that's right at the intersection of where Admiral and Sonia come together on the north side of Sonia. Basically, that pole would not be allowed under this new plan. It would have to be galvanized steel, and basically you wouldn't see anything, more or less anything protruding from the pole. There wouldn't be any cabling. You wouldn't see the brown antenna. Even the meter boxes would have to be in the pole with an access window on the outside of the pole. So that would be completely different. Again, the first thing we're going to try to do is to eliminate the need for a new pole in the first place. So we're going to try to encourage the applicant to work with LCUB figure out a way to try to use existing overhead utility systems where possible. But if they do have to put a pole in a new location in order to provide their service, then it's going to have to be, a galvanized steel pole that can accommodate more than one user, whether that user is current or in the future. The pole on the right is on Parkside Drive, and this one actually is pretty close to what would be allowed with this plan. The only difference, I think, if you go to the next slide, please. There are some protrusions from the pole. Those would actually have to be mostly in the pole there on the left. So that would be one difference. But more or less, that pole is pretty compliant with the requirements in this plan. The one on the right is an older 4G pole on Parkside Drive. And you can see the antenna at the top that protrude away from the pole. That would not be allowed with this plan. It would all have to be much more stealth and basically look like a single pole with maybe just a wider area at the top. And the light would probably have to flip in location, and it would be below the antenna. So, again, but the light would still be in the same general height of other lights along Parkside Drive in this case. So let's go to the next slide. This is another pole that actually would meet most of in fact, I think it would meet all of the requirements of this plan. And this is one that Verizon presented. So they can meet our plan. They've demonstrated it right here. That would be placed out at the Covert Turkey Creek. As you come in off of Parkside Drive into the Covert Turkey Creek on the left, they were proposing just a black pole, very stealth looking. I mean, it is a new pole in a new location, which is not ideal, but it is pretty discreet in comparison with the other poles that we looked at. So that's pretty close to what you would see. The thing is, with this pole, we need to make sure that it would be capable of accommodating another user in the future. So you may have one antenna at the top at this time, but we need to make sure that whatever pole's put in the ground, that if somebody wanted to come in and use the pole, that it would be able to accommodate that additional user. So go to the next slide, please. These poles are wooden poles. They were proposed mostly along Kingston Pike, and they are 4G poles. You can always tell a 4G pole because it has this radio cabinet that protrudes, in this case, from the pole. This would completely be counter to this plan. First of all, we don't allow wood poles. Nothing can protrude away from the pole like is shown here. That's one of the reasons that wood poles were discouraged. And after talking with our committee and the planning commission, is you can't put anything inside them. So, everything has to be on the outside. So that would have to change significantly to meet the aesthetic plan. So go to the next one, please. I'm about finished here. So this one was on Campbell Station Road, and it's been installed. I don't think the light's on it yet. And that one's pretty close to our requirements. It's not very far off. Again, I'm not sure that it will provide for an additional carrier in the future. It probably will, but it does by having a light fixture on it. It would meet the requirements of the plan because it has at least two vertical utility users. And that's pretty stealth. You can see that the meter box is contained in the pole, and that's something we're requiring with this plan. So everything's underground otherwise, or it's in the pole, and what protrudes from the pole is very minimal. Next slide. I guess that was it. Okay, well, that probably was more information than you all wanted to hear. But if you all have any questions or if there's anything in the plan that I can try to explain or answer questions about, I'll be happy to try to do so.
Okay, sir. Mark, I sure thank you.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve resolution 21-02.
Alderman Pinchuk, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. I guess now we'll start discussion and go ahead, Alderman Pinchuk.
I have a few questions for Mark. First of all, in January 2019, 11 cell structures were approved. How many of those have actually been installed? All of them?
No, sir. 4, to my knowledge, 4 have been installed.
Oh, okay.
Some of them don't have the fiber to them yet.
Okay.
Because they kind of stopped on their fiber in some areas, so that's part of the issue.
All right, thank you. Have there been any other poles, structures that have been approved by the Planning Commission other than this original 11?
Well, not since that time. We did have, we had 3 poles that were approved in 2016
Right.
From a company called Zayo, and those were 2 of them were on Parkside Drive. 1 was at Campbell Lakes Drive.
Right, I'm familiar with them. Yeah.
And then there was a AT&T pole that was placed out near Marshall's, in front of Marshall's on Parkside Drive.
Okay.
It looks pretty similar to, one of those images that we looked at earlier.
So with the ones that were approved in January of 2019 that have not been installed, can we have them installed based on this resolution?
No,
Too late?
they would be
Mark,
vested in those. Yeah. Yes.
Isn't there a 9-month time frame that they have to install these in, or they have to come back to us for? I can't remember if the law says reapplication or reapproval.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at that because it's a little poorly written in the state law in that regard.
Well, I would
probably just have to look at that and talk with the town attorney a little bit about it and just make sure we're all on the same page before.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, Alderman Pinchuk, but it's a point that you're making that I think we need to push back on, because they agreed when we went to the state to see if we could make an amendment last year. They came to us and agreed that they would work with us, and then they turned around and put these poles in place. So I would like it if we push back on them on the remaining poles that they're certainly more than a year out from when they applied for these or received approval of these. So I would like for us to push back on them. And I apologize for taking up your time.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that. I am there's a vested property rights law in the state too. So it's not quite as easy as it might sound to just have them meet the current requirements. I'll have to look at that and talk with town attorney about that.
Yeah, I agree 100% with Alderman Pavlin. So we need to look at that.
Okay.
Another question I have is, you decided to make this a resolution instead of an ordinance. And I guess I'm a little fuzzy as the reason or the advantage. Could you just briefly tell me that?
Well, one of the advantages is this requires one meeting, and given the fact that this involves telecommunications in one aspect, which is constantly evolving, it would be a little quicker and easier to make some modifications to update the document if we had to.
What's stronger, a resolution or an ordinance? I'm a little confused on that.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
They both would be fine. Those were things I talked with the mayor about. I mean, not the mayor, but the town attorney about. So yeah, we talked about that.
Alderman Pinchuk, it's David Smoke. The state law allows the towns or counties, whoever wants to approve these aesthetic plans, to do it by resolution or by ordinance. It's however we decide to do it. and I agree with Mark, we're much more flexible and we're able to really amend these quicker via resolution than by ordinance. And either one will give us the same impact to regulate these in the future.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. One last question, just a point of clarification. On Concord Road, those lights that we have in there are different than, I think that's exhibit, if I recall, 5 or 6. Let's see, what, if I may. Those are exhibit 5. And yet we're calling the exhibit 6 light fixtures bell fixtures. Exhibit 5 sure does look more like a bell than it's exhibit 6. What do we call what's on Concord Road? What do we call that type of light fixture? I'm just curious.
That's an acorn.
A what?
Acorn.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Now, the one on the, just for clarification, Exhibit 5 is not the one on Concord Road. That is a pole that would meet our requirements. The ones on Concord Road, I don't know if they are capable of accommodating a telecommunications antenna or not. So all I'm saying is the fixtures themselves are decorative, and those were like planned and approved years ago. So that's why they're a little bit different looking. The one on Exhibit 5 actually has a antenna at the top and a light fixture. So that's what we would want if it were a new pole in a new location in an area that the Planning Commission or the board or both wanted to have a certain visual impact or visual effect.
Got it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, that would be an acorn in its shell. Okay. That's
yeah.
What it's supposed to look like. Okay, Vice Mayor Coughlin, you can go next.
I don't have much to add. I apologize for interrupting Alderman Pinjock. I just knew he was on the same track that I'm very well aware of some of parts of this law, and that 9-month, I know that was that was negotiated into the law by the local governments because they didn't want them to be able to just hang out there forever. So I understand that we want to review this with the attorney, but I really want to be aggressive with this. We've really been kind of pushed around by the telecommunication companies where our residential neighborhoods are concerned. So if there's an opportunity to push back hard, I think that this is maybe the mountain we need to stand on. So I just want to make that very clear.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Yep.
Hey, Alderman Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to thank you, Mark, and the community volunteers for their time in putting this plan together, as well as the Plan Commission. I think it's very well written because I can understand it, which is actually unusual. The only question I have is, I would just make sure I understand, who owns the poles? It's not the town, right? It's the utility that's putting.
Well, that's a good question, and that's one of the requirements in the plan under the ancillary section.
That's where I was kind of confused. I wasn't following that exactly.
Yeah, that is one of the latter sections that in the plan, and that is what has to be established on the front end. Pole ownership, the ownership of other structures on the pole, because it could be different owners. You may have a pole owner, but then you may have, and likely will have, an owner of other structures that are on the pole. So, how are individual structures being maintained? Who's liable? What if the pole needs to be taken down? It's no longer necessary. What's the process for who's going to be responsible for that? How does that work? So all those things we tried to address in that ancillary section toward the end of the document. So they'd have to kind of think about that and provide that as part of the plan.
So they being whoever's putting the
applicant.
The
applicant.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so is there ever a time where the town, if we chose to get into the, pole renting business, is that prohibited from this plan? It doesn't look like it, because it's open enough to where whoever the owner is determined at the time of the applications made. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's something that we just have to look at. You know, a lot of the poles right now in our community are owned by LCUB, most of them actually. The ones we own some light poles on like Parkside Drive, Campbell Station, South Campbell Station. But most of the vertical utilities are owned by LCUB. And that was one of the benefits of having one of the representatives on our committee, because he could kind of let me know if I was providing something that was unrealistic, or it needed to be kind of simplified. Like, for example, light fixtures. We talked, as I mentioned earlier, quite a bit about that. But LCUB, if they're going to be the ones that are managing these light fixtures, they don't want to have 20 different fixtures to have to keep in stock, in a community. So we'll have to, work with them on that. And but the ownership is a key aspect of this plan, and it's something that we don't currently have any specific provisions for people to address, and that really needs to be addressed. And so it will be as part of this.
okay. And so I'll ask my question of the vice mayor and the mayor, since you guys are on the planning commission. Do you all believe that this document would be prohibitive in the future if the town wanted to go down that road of owning the poles? Like, I don't see it prohibiting. I'm not saying we should do that. I just want to make sure there's no prohibition on who can own. I don't see a prohibition, but I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly.
I don't get that sense from the
Okay,
document.
okay. So we're on the same page. Okay. And now I know what an acorn is, so I have no other questions.
Yeah, we don't address who owns the poles in this document. We just address the fact that it needs to be identified on the front end if somebody is adding new vertical utility to the town.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, Alderman Burnett.
Yeah, Mark, for the cantennas, can the color of those match the pole? It seems like we have some that are green poles with a big black, well, yeah, it's up here on Exhibit 5. Can we make those to be green?
Oh, yeah, we would probably want that. That was just, really, I got that picture to show more of the lighting fixture than anything, and I was having trouble finding the right lighting fixture that had an actual telecommunications antenna on it. But we would actually want the whole thing to be the same color, I would think, unless there was a really good reason not to do that for some reason.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be much better the same color.
In fact, the plan recommends that they be black unless there's a reason to do so otherwise. Again, the Planning Commission has the ability and the flexibility to make changes to that if it makes more sense to use a different color in a different context because of maybe other existing vertical utilities in the area. But the plan, if you're just putting in a new plan without any other guidance, the pole would have to be black and everything on it black.
Okay. I'm hearing that we want to, we would rather have these on existing poles, right? So I guess I'm kind of a little bit confused. Like Admiral Road has an existing pole that's wooden. And so we said we'd like to use existing poles, but I thought I heard you say that one couldn't be used. The picture you showed on Admiral Road. Can you help me understand how we could use existing ones?
Go back to that slide, or maybe up. It's the next slide, Allison, I think. Yeah. Well, what I said, the pole on the left is a new wooden pole.
Oh, it's a new pole.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Now they put wood pole there because the other existing poles in that distribution line system are wood.
Got it.
And that's something I specifically asked the committee and the planning commission was, do you want to go back with wood poles in an area that has wood poles? And they really did not want to do that. They wanted to have the galvanized steel. for a number of reasons. It's more durable. I think really, and the LCUB is representative indicated to us that if they put in a new pole, it's going to be a metal pole. It's not going to be a wood pole. So we're just trying to, again, we're trying to plan ahead and not continue in a pole type that is really probably outdated, and it really doesn't address the objectives of the plan as well as a metal pole, because the metal pole, again, as I mentioned earlier, you can put stuff in the pole, and then you can paint it brown if you want to make it look kind of like a wooden pole, I guess, but everything else is going to be in the pole or a minimal protrusion from the pole, similar to that pole on the right.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
Yep, I didn't know that was an existing pole. I didn't know that was a new pole. I thought it was existing.
Yeah, that's a new pole. And in fact, I think there's 3 in that subdivision. There's one other one, I believe, that's been installed, and then one more. And they all would be wood poles. And then there's some on Kingston Pike, as I mentioned earlier, that are 4G poles that would be wooden. So those would all not be allowed under this plan.
Okay. And then the one pole that you showed in Turkey Creek that had a light on it, do the lights that we want on those, don't we want those looking more like Concord Road or the Acorn?
Well, if you're talking about the one that was at the cove at Turkey Creek, they actually ended up working with the homeowners association and taking the light off because they didn't want it. So we don't want to really force lighting, especially in a residential area, if the residents don't want it.
But I mean Turkey Creek. Like, wouldn't we want a little higher end light than that?
Oh, you're talking about like the one on the right? Yeah.
Those are the lights that are in Turkey Creek, all down Turkey Creek.
Yeah, here's the thing with that. When we talked about this, is unless you're changing out a series of light poles in a bigger system change, then if you changed one light fixture to something very different, it was going to look pretty out of place. I think I mean, I personally, I don't disagree with you at all. I think it'd be nice to have a more decorative fixture along, especially streets that don't have any other overhead utilities like Parkside Drive or South Campbell Station. But you've got numerous fixtures just like that on those roads currently. So I think if there was ever something that there was a larger scale change to that system, that would be a time to really address it comprehensively. That's kind of what the guidance I received back from the Planning Commission and the committee.
Okay. And then kind of my last question, for these polls in our community, at one point I would have thought we may have 20, 30, 40, 50 applications by now and things going in left and right. Do things seem to have slowed down in a big way, or like companies are backing off from what was initially thought to be coming and how quickly it was coming?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I do see a lot of these polls out, just outside the town as well. So I think they are putting a lot of polls up. They still have some that they could put up that were conditionally approved. We obviously need to look at that and see if that needs to change. We've been in discussion with Verizon about adding 7 additional locations in the town, but my understanding from that discussion was they were going to try to, on most of those, they were going to try to use existing LCUB distribution line system poles. So that would be ideal because you already got the pole out there and you got structures on it. You're just adding another structure on that existing pole. But we haven't had anybody submit anything yet on that, so I guess we'll see.
All right. Appreciate your thorough work as always. That's all for me, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. My thought is, again, I want to thank the LCUB staff member, our staff, the residents that were, our citizens that were on the steering committee, our board and planning commissioners for the hours that they invested in development of this aesthetic plan. It's really a job well done. At that point, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Burnett,
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer,
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchuk,
Alderman Pinchuk, yes.
Alderman Pavlin,
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Let the record show that resolution 21-02 has been approved. Okay, next, it have one ordinance tonight to review with public hearing. This will be on the first reading. Ordinance 21-04, an ordinance to rezone the property situated around the eastern intersection of McPhee Road and Boyd Station, parcels 50, 50.1, 54.01, and 9.01. Be located on tax map 162, 12611 Boyd Station Road, and general single family residential R2, the open space mixed residential overlay R1 OSMR. It'll be 131.25 acres with OBO Homestead Land Holdings as applicant.
Okay, this is Mark Shipley again. I'll review this item. This property, if you can bring up the next slide, please. We'll put it on the screen. Yeah. It obviously is a large tract. It involves 4 separate parcels currently. It has about 3,000 linear feet of frontage on Boyd Station Road. Then it has a couple of access points onto McPhee Road to the west. Then over to the very far east, there's a parcel that accesses Virtue Road. The property is currently very agricultural. It's been a farm up to now. There's agricultural structures on the property. It has a transmission line easement. I think it might show up on the next, if you can go maybe, yeah, go one more slide, please. Yeah, it's hard to see here, but there's a transmission line easement that comes from Virtue Road, and it comes through that narrow tract west, and then it drops down south to Boyd Station Road and runs parallel with Boyd Station Road, then turns due north up into the substation, LCUB substation, which is there on McPhee Road that abuts part of this property. So it has that associated with it. It also has likely some depressional areas, possibly sinkholes. The immediate area that abuts this property is mostly agricultural or very low density residential. The exception to that would be the cottages at Price Farms in the northwest part of the property. You can kind of see that circular street there. It's Cottage Price Farm Boulevard. So it is in an area, of course, in town that's the most undeveloped part of the town, but it is rapidly developing. We've had the Brass Lantern subdivision off McPhee Road just north of the park. There's a property just south of the park that has plans for a development there. And, you know, obviously in the immediate area, there's just a lot of development going on in the town, and then on the other side of the railroad tracks and Choteau area outside of the town. So it's unlikely to remain an agricultural area. As I mentioned earlier, this property does have a lot of frontage on Boyd Station Road. Boyd Station Road is a collector street, major collector, and it will have to be brought up to the standards of the complete street cross sections provided for in our subdivision regulations later on as part of the subdivision development. Basically the property is currently zoned. It's not zoned agricultural. It's zoned general single family residential R2 and has been that district for many years. Their request is to rezone it to R1 OSMR. That's open space mixed residential. And that provides for basically a requirement of 35% of the 131.25 acres has to be permanent open space. And then they can have a mix of attached and detached dwelling units in the OSMR versus the OSR, which is just detached. So the OSMR is comparable to what you see at the cottages at Price Farms, where they have that development actually has mostly attached single family. They do have some detached in the newer portion on the south end. So if you look at the future land use map, and I think that would be the next, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, there. The OSMR and the OSR are both consistent with the future land use map designation, which is open space cluster. And that's really the designations. You can see there most of that part of the town, which makes sense. It keeps kind of an open space character to the area, and it allows for the flexibility to work with the development opportunities that these parcels may have. They do have a fair amount of sinkholes in this general area and things like that. So it allows you to kind of work better with the land, either of those zoning districts. So the OSMR, would be kind of consistent with the cottages at Price Farm. It would be much less consistent with most of the rest of the plan of development around this property. So that's a consideration that we brought up with the Planning Commission. Obviously, the 4 tracts need to be combined if the property is rezoned prior to second reading, because there's 2 parcels in there that are less than 5 acres, and the minimum lot size in OSR or OSMR is 5 acres. So that would be a requirement prior to second reading if this moves forward. So when this was presented to the Planning Commission for a vote in January, there was a layout that was shown. I think I've got that on the next slide, Allison, please. It's a very hypothetical, conceptual layout of what the development might look like on this property. This has the mix of attached and detached, mostly detached with this layout. And it kind of gave the Planning Commission an idea of what this might look like as built out. If you basically took the existing zoning district, you'd have all single family detached in R2, but you would have less flexibility in working around some of the, I guess, challenging aspects of the property, and you would have a net less amount of open space. So, but you would have a guaranteed minimum lot size of at least 15,000 square feet. So those are things that we talked through with the Planning Commission. The commission did feel that having some mix of attached and detached was actually good for the property given its size and would help complement the development. They were concerned, however, about just an open-ended rezoning to OSMR because, one person's concept could be, somebody else could take over the project and end up with an all detached or all attached project. But they did like the idea of mixing it up somewhat. It does address the providing for additional housing choice that is a strategy of our land use plan. So when they discussed this for a vote, they did unanimously end up recommending approval of ordinance 2104, but they placed a couple of conditions on the rezoning that they are recommended to the board. The first condition was that to encourage a variety of housing consistent with our land use plan, up to 100 of the total number of permitted dwelling units could be attached, with the locations to be determined as part of the concept review. That's required for this zoning district with the Planning Commission. Now, I will say that this development could yield up to 286 dwelling units. So this would be, a much smaller portion of the attached versus detached breakdown there. And then the second condition was that prior to second reading, the 4 lots would be combined with a plat so that we're not rezoning a substandard lot that doesn't meet the 5-acre minimum. So that's kind of an overview of this matter and the Planning Commission's recommendation. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. I know the applicant's here, and I do believe there's a letter from the citizen related to this.
Yeah, Mark, Mayor, do you have a map that shows the 4 separate lots?
I don't have the ability to draw on this, but I don't know if you can see. I wish you could see my cursor, but I don't think you can. You can kind of see the faint lines. If you look on that yellow tract, if you come in off of McPhee and go back to the depth of that R1 lot, there's a line there. That's one of the substandard lots. Then, of course, you got a big lot to the east of that, and then the biggest tract is east of that lot, and those are fine. Then you got the less than 5-acre tract that goes out to Virtue Road. So those are the 2 parcels that would have to be combined with the rest of the property in order to rezone them.
Okay, that section, that's not the little portion that faces McPhee, that small lot, but the next one, the rectangular lot that runs from Boyd Station all the way back to Price. How big a lot is that right there?
I don't remember, to be honest with you. I'd have to go back and check. I don't remember.
That's 33.4 acres.
Okay. That's what I needed to know.
Can this is Alderman Pablo. I'm just going to make a motion so that we can get this, I guess, the conversation started. A move to approve ordinance 21-04 on first reading, subject to the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission.
Alderman Meyer, second.
Okay. I guess what we need right now that we've got a motion on the floor in a second, we're with a clean sheet of paper. We're going to start with and we're ready for our citizens' questions and comments to be read into the record. I think we do have one.
Yes, sir, we do have one. It is from Steve and Jenny Williams at 721 Virtue Road. Says our quiet, slower side of Farragut is and has always been a rural open area with large single-family lots and small farms for some 30 years. We have owned our farm and house at 721 Virtue Road, which is 44 acres. Farragut has done an excellent job of creating transitions of open space buffers between different communities and types of homes and developments. We're asking the BMA and FMPC to continue the legacy of transitions with buffers, large open space where new communities have joined, agricultural zone land, and large lot communities, and that multifamily zero lot line homes be sited adjoining a same type of community price farm. It would not match previous Farragut planning nor the zoning documents to plan multifamily attached units or smaller lots near agricultural land where lots are currently 5 to 7 acres and next to our A-zoned farm of plus or minus 44 acres. Large buffers and open spaces with locating the multifamily component near existing multifamily will soften the impact of our rural way of life and provide transitions between the more intense developments of 280 to 350 new homes. And then he mentions the attached maps and information that were emailed to you all earlier. Then we go down to, and he also reviews the guidelines, the principles that support his request. So thank you for your time and your service to our town. We've watched Farragut grow and become the most desirable community in our region. We raised horses, sheep, goats, peacocks, and more other animals I can count. 3 of our 4 children live in Farragut with their children. Our older son lives in Portland, Oregon. Farragut is special to our family, and we have invested much of our savings and efforts in Farragut and our home and farm. We request that any zoning and future concept final plat approval require open space and buffer strips near agricultural property to transition to the existing 5+ acre home sites and our 44 acre farm. In general, we support rezoning to R1 OSMR with these conditions. Restrictions included in the zoning approval to be reflected included in the restrictions concept, design plan, and final plat. A, any multifamily zero lot line home segment shall occur only when the western section of the parcel that borders the Price Farm multifamily community running down to Boyd Station Road, with no multifamily zero lot line homes constructed within 1,000 linear feet of land zoned agricultural. B, buffer strips and open space of not less than 200 feet wide times the total length of our adjoining property, 2 property lines, and he had highlighted those in yellow in his attachments, shall be planned, designed into a new community separating agricultural zone land from this new R1 OSMR parcel, with said buffers open space to be used only as open spaces. Buffer strips open space shall not be included as part of the lot and shall have no roads, amenities, or buildings on or in the buffer strip and open spaces. Thank you. Please call for discussion and clarification. And that's our only comment for this item.
Okay. Thank you, Allison. I want to thank Mr. Williams for his presentation there, and we certainly have all looked at it, and it will be, again, we start with a clean sheet of paper, and it's right there on there. We've looked at all of it. I know I have, and I'm sure the others have as well. So, and we'll start with discussion with our board discussion with Alderman Burnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the kind of pre-concept plan was very helpful and, you know, getting closer to realizing the aim of the project. So I appreciate them supplying that and getting a view of what they're seeing. You know, I agree with the Planning Commission that, you know, due to the largely rural character of the area, that we should limit the attached housing. I do think putting a limit on the attached portion protects the rural feel and also keeps us, as was mentioned earlier, from having kind of an open-ended level of attached housing on such a large piece of property. So I guess what I kind of hone in on is what the limit of that attached housing is and what I think it should be. And that, you know, I'm not quite sure. I think if it was me, I probably would have gone a little lower than the Planning Commission, but if I could pass it to you, either mayor or vice mayor, and just add some thoughts as to how y'all landed at 100 dwelling units, if there were other thoughts kicked around, or kind of how y'all came to that limit.
Okay, sir, then I guess segue into that will be, and you can come back and ask more if you like, Alderman Burnett, will be Vice Mayor Paul.
Okay, thank you. First off, with Alderman Burnett, I think what we were looking at, certainly it's specific to that particular property and where it would fit. They've backed it up to where the LCUB station is. So in designing that, and then Allison, can you pull the preliminary concept plan that they have up? Can you put that back on the screen? Yep, there. So you can see where they have the LCUB station. So I guess in designing that, they wanted to have a more cohesive look for that street, and then bring it again around so that you could have the single family backing up to the single family. So I think it was more or less, okay, how does this work? And that with that delineation of numbers, they're meeting their density numbers that they're looking for. Certainly there's going to be quite an investment in improving their frontage on Boyd Station, and that's a challenging piece of property with the sinkholes in it, that if they can meet their density of 2.178 units per acre, that certainly helps it make their numbers. You also have to realize that having the attached single family tends to have a lot less traffic with it per household than the single family attached. And I don't know what the argument for school yield, because typically condos or townhomes don't yield as many students. But the jury will be out in this neighborhood because it will be a mix of housing. You very well could see young families moving into these townhomes and fitting in very nicely with the rest of it. But that was pretty much the philosophy. There was we kind of pulled what we saw from it. It certainly wasn't half and half. I guess it's about
35%.
Huh?
35%.
35%. So that's what we're looking for, about a third. So that's what it came out to.
Okay, and then as we're looking at this kind of pre-concept plan, the changes that were made to this versus the previous one I saw was attached housing here at the southeastern portion. Were there any other changes, Mr. Rackley?
No, I'm not quite certain what you saw previously. I have done a couple of different editions of this, but my intent was always to work with the land for what the land will give us, as far as providing the ability for road grades and pad grading and yards and open space, and working around the areas that are potentially depressions or areas that tend to collect water that would be best left to collect water. And also placing any of the higher density or attached units where they don't abut any of the surrounding single family. And so that's why it's right now the attached units external to the new development are only abutting the substation and a common area detention pond of the subdivision that you live in, Mr. Burnett. And then of course we've got a small little section that abuts Boyd Station Road, which is a public throughway. So and we didn't internally we see this as more of 3 different housing types, and basically in thirds. The single family detached includes 2 different primary lot sizes, and so with a subdivision to create it, make a diverse subdivision with plenty of housing choice, and to attract the greatest number of potential buyers, was to roughly split it into thirds between the attached and then a regular detached, and then a larger detached housing lot. Obviously, those being 3 distinct different price points and different products. but I can't say for certain what you had seen before, because again, I've done this I've laid this out 3 or 4 times to land on what I think, as I, laid out, Briarstone and Brass Lantern and Brookmere and the last 2 phases of Sheffield and McKinley Station. I go through quite a few iterations before I land on something that works not only with what the developers, my clients, desires are, but also with what the land will give me, as far as what will be the least invasive to construct. So that's how I work through my process.
Gotcha. So the front single family lots, if you're coming in from the McPhee roundabout, those are the larger lots. And then to the south of that would be your attached. And then to the far east, that's your smaller, you said the third type of house?
Yeah, well, they're still 76 foot wide, but they're not 86 foot wide. So we have several. Saddlebrook has several different housing plans. Some that can accommodate a third car garage on narrower lots than others. So some of those lots, with most likely when we come back, with if it's the pleasure of the board to approve this ordinance, and we come back with a concept plan, in the northeast side. The lots around the outside are the 86 or 82 foot wide lots, and then across the street on the uphill side of the cross streets will most likely end up being the larger lots to provide for basements. They'll be a little bit larger home, a little bit higher product. Again, it's not, the price point disparity really comes down on the detached to square footage. So square footage of the house, and the larger the lot, the larger the building footprint, the larger the house. And working with the grades in that area, because that is the high point, and working down towards Boyd Station, there will be some basement lots as you step down the hill, for the lots that we'll say are the driveways would be, the driveway alignment would be perpendicular to Boyd Station. Those you would have to have basements on those. So we're a long way from getting to that level of detail, but when I lay things out, since I design it too, and I'm involved in the construction, I'm building it in my mind as I go to try to draw things that, although this is preliminary and there are no absolutes, this will work. This is very detailed out. This is not make-believe, on what I drew here. This is this layout right here with a few modifications and tweaks for, once I start pulling road grades, could evolve very quickly into a concept plan, and then construction drawings from there. So I don't, I'm not an architect, so I don't draw make-believe. I'm an engineer. I draw things that I check all 247 boxes as I'm going to make sure that they work. So.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, Mayor, this is David Smoke. Can I just jump in real quick, just for a point of clarification for the board members? I know the concept plan that you have in front of you is helpful for you to see what's going on, but you are not approving any concept plans tonight or any layouts. That's the Planning Commission's role. This concept plan could change completely going to the Planning Commission. It's just kind of giving you a visualization of how those lots and layouts may perform. But really what you're doing is you're approving the zoning and then any conditions of that zoning, which you've already talked about in your motion.
And that's why I called it a pre-concept plan.
That's what I wanted to talk about when I have my turn.
Okay, something's a little bit different tonight. Because this is a very large piece of property, instead of going with the normal, I should have announced this earlier, instead of going with a normal type of program like we do, where we let let Russ do a presentation, I thought it would be because of what we're looking at, of this type of a development, I thought it would be better for Russ to be on board to answer questions and let each alderman have his own questions to ask Russ. And then if for him to kind of hear what each man has to say or a woman has to say on this particular project, so that he could make notes and then if he has anything to add presentation wise afterwards, based on the questions we've asked him, then I think it would be like I said, this is an important piece of property, and I want to make sure that it's well vetted with our group, like it was with the Planning Commission. And looks like the Vice Mayor is very anxious to get started with her.
Yes.
We'll go to her next.
Well, and it was
because I don't want to step in front of her. Go ahead.
It goes to David's point. This is we struggled with this the last time we had a request for OSMR, and I understand that we are not approving a preliminary a concept plan here. Although I think if this does get approved and we go through the concept plan at the MPC, I expect to see something very similar to this, or I won't be approving a concept plan. So, and I guess as a planning commissioner, I can kind of make that statement. But I think what we need to do going forward is to possibly amend our OSMR zoning district to require a preliminary concept plan for OSMR zoning, so that the board is comfortable with what they're looking at. Now, preliminary concept plan is a pretty rough thing, and obviously Russ has already indicated that there may be some changes, but if the essence of it is what's approved, and if we want to tie numbers to it, whatever makes the board feel comfortable when we're dealing with, because we have another bigger piece of property that may come up eventually with all of this, and they may be asking for OSMR, and we need some understanding of what that looks like, so we're not just kind of, I know that the board was very uncomfortable last time, so that is something that I'd like to work with Mark on. If the rest of the board is interested in having that extra step put in there for OSMR, I think it would make them feel very comfortable with that. But I've made the other statements that I think a mix of housing is good. There's challenges with this LCUB substation. That's an opportunity for them to take advantage of that and put in some townhomes, which are certainly desirable in our community. You bring it in as a complete neighborhood, and it's, no one's getting upset because it's already all there. I did want to address some of Mr. Williams' concerns, because I responded to his email just to give him the history. This property has always been zoned for residential since the town was incorporated. It was R1, and it became it was rezoned to R2 in 1994. There are all you have is a 25-foot setback in the rear property line. So there are no protections in R2. If the developer was so inclined to put a buffer around the exterior of it, I would expect to see a walking trail in that buffer, because that's what you do with these open spaces, is you put walking trails in them. Now, obviously, Russ has presented something that we're certainly considering, and it's not showing a buffer. The request for a 200-foot buffer is certainly, to me, out of anything we've ever done before. The most that I've seen is a 25-foot buffer included in the 50-foot required setback from the peripheral property line. I think 200, if you do the measurement, 200-foot buffer, they're asking for 10 acres to be given over to buffer in this property. And really, quite frankly, I guess that's the high point of the property. It gives you some views. You're asking them to give up some of the valuable portion of this void property when it has always been zoned residential. So I'm struggling to think that it's appropriate for us to put in require a buffer beyond what we've required from other neighborhoods, which was, I don't think we've ever required anything beyond 25 foot of a landscape buffer. But Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. But I just wanted to go on record with clarity. I understand Mr. Williams would like to see some delineation, but he's got a well-treed buffer in between, planted between his property and this property. And just so everybody's aware, because I'm sure I've told everyone, I have a road going in behind my house, and it doesn't have a 25-foot planted landscape buffer. So I understand the frustration, but this property was always intended to be residential, and so I'm struggling to come up with a buffer that he would probably find suitable. So that's all I wanted to say.
Can, if it pleases the vice mayor, can I add something to what you said?
That's fine. Yeah, please.
The layout that was presented, again, that you're not voting on, but there is a minimum 25-foot buffer around the periphery. This zoning requires a 50-foot periphery setback. So I generally always put a 25-foot buffer around the periphery so that my rear setback on those periphery lots is 25 feet. There's not a lot of sense in because of the 35% open space requirement in including that in lot area. So there is a buffer, and in fact, in the corner against Mr. Williams, because of the radius of the road and the depth of the lot, there's even greater than a 25-foot buffer around that inset corner into his property. So it's hard to see on the layout sketch that we provided because of the scale to try to get it on one sheet. But there is a 25-foot buffer around the periphery, excluding the public right-of-ways, obviously, but around the periphery, there's a minimum 25-foot buffer, just as a point of clarity. That's my intent moving forward. That's my client's intent moving forward with any layout, as we always do with OSR or OSMR in the town of Farragut, is a 25-foot periphery buffer. And that maintains the historic fence line. Generally, the fence lines in Farragut are old, intermediate to old growth tree lines. So it preserves those. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. That's the reason we're doing that in this format. So feel free to jump in and answer questions, make clarification. That's the reason we're doing it this way.
And I'm finished, okay, Mayor Williams. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Scott, you're chomping at the bit, so you can go right ahead.
Actually, I'm good. Y'all already asked all the questions, so I'm good. The only comment I will make is number one. Well, a couple. Mayor Williams, I appreciate you going a little bit different with the process this time because the visual does help. So thank you for that. My question is for Mr. Rackley. So are you comfortable with the limitation of the 100 attached properties?
Yeah, we would not object to that. Okay. Again, it is our desire, and I said this in you can go back in our original MPC discussion only meeting, which was the November meeting, and said we do not desire to have a majority of attached. We desire to have a blend of housing choices. So we would not ever want to, but again, that's us. We control the property right now. Rezoning, as Mr. Smoke pointed out, rezoning is rezoning. But it is not our intention, and never has been, to get beyond that 35%-ish mark on that. So the 100 units of the total maximum density as attached is acceptable to the developers in this case.
Okay. And then question for David. So the contingency that we're voting on tonight, for some reason something happens in the future, maybe there's too many sinkholes or whatever, and the limit for some reason needs to be exceeded. Maybe there's a new developer involved or whatever. Is that contingency stays in place, correct? Like if something happens further down the process and the developer wants that removed, they have to come back to the Plan Commission and back to us. Is that correct?
Yes, Alderman Meyer, this is David Smoke again. And I would just add this, since Mr. Hale is not on the line tonight, that is a condition. It's not a negotiation with the developer.
Right.
So if you feel like 100 is the right number, then that's perfectly okay to the board. If you feel like
Okay.
less than that is comfortable, or more than that, it's up to the board of mayor and aldermen the number of attached units that you're comfortable with, and that would be placed on this piece of property once it gets rezoned for anybody that would come along to buy it in the future.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity. No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Meyer. Okay, Alderman Pinchot.
Yes, I've got a few questions. Russ, there's a piece of property the furthest to the east, which extends out to Virtue Road. It doesn't look like there's a road in your concept plan here. I mean, is there a reason in that plan why you didn't put a road, an entrance road out to Virtue? I mean, you can do that, correct?
Well, in this case, Alderman Pinchot, that the frontage on Virtue is less than 20 feet. It doesn't meet the requirement for a 50-foot public right of way. And that what I call that dagger, that parcel that it looks like a knife blade over there. The majority of it is currently consumed with the LCB overhead power line easement. So it would be a completely unsupported road with would not meet the requirements for Farragut for the minimum width of a public right of way. So that's why I'm envisioning that with simply a walking trail, greenway trail connection down to Virtue. It's just simply, and the grade is pretty aggressive as you get closer to Virtue, as the property narrows, which just compounds things. But the bottom line is it's just not wide enough for a 50-foot right of way.
All right, thank you for that explanation. I just assumed this property was going to have 3 access roads. One of the things I had mentioned to Mr. Money was if we could keep the attached units on the south third of this property, which it pretty much is, but so that it would have mainly access off of Boyd Station. So I don't know if that's possible. I know you've got a lot to deal with as far as sinkholes and the topography and whatever else. So, but that was one of my thoughts, was if we could keep all of those units, the attached units, fairly close to one another and to the southern part of the property. He mentioned also that he was thinking of putting some extra foliage or buffering by the utility property.
Yes.
He wants to hide that a little bit, so I know he's looking at some extra buffering there as well.
Yes, he's given me that direction. I've not moved back over to the next evolution of this layout yet, pending this meeting and the subsequent meetings to see if we actually have a project. But it is to pull those away from the substation a little bit more so that we can create a what I call a golf berm, or what you see along the sides of fairways. Just a small knoll that you can grass and plant to create some screening for the back patios of those attached units over there. So they would be pulled away some and trade out open space that's currently shown for amenity for periphery open space that would be a planted buffer outside of the LCB easement. But there's plenty of room to do that. And that is on my list when I get back into taking the next evolution on this project.
Well, the only thing is, if there's any way you can, when you're reworking this or coming up with your final plan, to try to keep those attached to the southern third of that property as best you can. That would be my recommendation. So okay. Otherwise, I don't have any other questions or comments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. And Chuck, my only request, I think Mr. Hale said this, there's really, it's not a negotiation as far as the number. I sit pretty quietly during the planning commission and listen. That's generally what I do before I ever speak. But my thought on this originally was the maximum of 1/3. And I think that's probably a better way to look at it, because, anyway, at that point, I have nothing else for Mr. Rackley. If Mr. Burnett or any of the others want to redirect, come back to him on questions. Now, if they've heard other questions, then you're more than welcome to. And I'll start with Alderman Burnett.
Yeah, I just had a question. Alderman Pinchak asked about that blade on the far east side. There's a much smaller one that connects to McPhee Road on the east side, right next to where it says R1. Any thoughts to what that would be, could be, or?
Well, currently it's just part of the open space. I imagine staff and planning commission may want us to put a greenway trail through there. I know the gentleman on the other that lives next door to that. I believe he's your neighbor. He's reached out to me to see if we would sell that to him. But we're way early in the process to consider that. So I mean, it will not be a road. It's only 25 foot wide. Again, it's not wide enough for a public road. So the other than open space, the only thing it could be would be a walking trail.
Okay, is that all you got, Alderman Burnett?
That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay, Vice Mayor Pavlin?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, Alderman Pinchot?
I have nothing else.
Okay, Alderman Meyer?
Mayor Williams, just want to thank you for your comment about the 33 or 30% limitation. That makes more sense to me. That helped me kind of clarify my decision. So thank you. That's very helpful and it sounds reasonable. So no other comments.
Well, the reason I said 1/3 is, you know, once Russ starts doing his thing there, as a civil engineer does with the land, and he's looking at the topo, and he's looking at the sinkholes, and he's looking at all the other things that come into play, the grade and all, and how he lays out the houses as far as some of them are basement, some of them are not, you know, topo. I think that it makes more sense to put it that way as opposed to saying a certain number of houses or a certain number of ones that are connected. I think it just makes more sense to me because he don't know yet, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he knows yet exactly what. I mean, yeah, we're looking at a very rough preliminary site plan of what's on his mind right this minute, but until he starts working with the property, I don't think he really has a very defined number of what really he can do, and I think the percentage would be to me is a better number as opposed to limiting an actual unit number. That's only
yeah, and I appreciate that. The contingency is in the percentage language, correct? Or is it 100? I'm trying to find the contingency. I know I read it somewhere. Is it a limit of 100 house? Actually,
yeah, it's 100, up to 100. I mean, that's the
up to 100. Okay. Okay.
They could do less. I mean, that's no more than that.
I still think that for me, the percentage seems to be more fair, but I'm not going to split hairs over it. I want to be able to give the developer as much flexibility as possible and not tying them into a number. That's why I was asking about the 100 versus the percentage makes more sense to me, but I'm fine with it either way, I guess. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, at this point, I guess, without any other...
Mr. Mayor, may I add one thing?
Well, sure.
Item number 2 of staff's recommendations, and I understand that the two extreme parcels, the west parcel along McPhee is under 5 acres, and the Dagger parcel that fronts that we've discussed that fronts Virtue is under 5 acres. But the recommendation, which I didn't know that it was a prior to second reading to combine those. I knew we needed to combine those to affect the rezoning because you can't rezone anything less than 5 acres. But I'm a little uncomfortable prior to second reading because I'm not one to take anything for granted to manipulate the property owner's property. It seems to be it could be a very simple thing to affect. You're essentially deleting two deed lines. Again, none of these 4 parcels have ever been a part of any plat. They're deed parcels. We have done a boundary survey on all 4 of them, but I would prefer if it is the pleasure of the board to approve this ordinance, that it be approved subject to combining the 4 parcels into 2, thereby eliminating the 2 parcels less than 5 acres in order for the zoning to be effective. I'm a little uncomfortable asking a seller or a property owner to manipulate their property before we have the approvals guaranteed that we need to move forward with owning the property. I hope that makes sense. It's just a kind of a chicken and the egg thing on the way we normally do things with our sellers. So if it pleases the board, I would just ask that item number 2, instead of saying prior to, that it says before the before the rezoning is effective, that the parcels must be combined. And we're certainly okay with that, and we understand that. We've understood it all along. It's just a matter of what comes first. A lot of things can happen between first and second reading, and assuming we're successful tonight with what the pleasure of the board is on their vote. But that's the only point that me and my clients wanted to make is we really don't want to go messing with somebody's property until we have the conditional approvals in place first. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Myers, so could you or Vice Mayor Paul revisit one more time the justification of the Planning Commission for the second contingency, please? You might have said it, and I've probably forgotten it. Or Mark or anybody. I mean, anybody.
Yeah, I'll address it.
Okay.
You can't.
Okay.
You can't rezone a property to be OSMR that's less than 5 acres.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Okay.
So those two pieces of property, the one at the roundabout and the one that looks like a dagger, are both less than 5 acres. So they can't technically be zoned OSMR until they're combined in with a larger parcel.
So I'm not comfortable veering away from this contingency then.
No, well, it can't.
Well,
I think the concern is, I understand the concern expressed is until you have second reading, there's no guarantees, obviously. I mean, I don't want to go into all the gory details that could happen between first and second reading, and all of a sudden you don't have the votes you need to go to second reading. So I get that we do subject twos all the time. David, there's a language that we use, subject to these, something that it doesn't have to be second reading. It has to be subject to the parcels being joined.
Yes, ma'am. I guess what I would ask Mark is if he is comfortable with language that would basically say that the zoning would not be effective until after the parcels are combined, and to make them legal parcels to be able to be rezoned. That could come 10 days after this is pushed through on second reading. It could come 6 months after, but it wouldn't be effective until after those are actually combined. So that would be, and then that means they could not go to the Planning Commission for any kind of concept site plan approvals until those things occurred. Mark, would you be comfortable with that language?
I would be comfortable with that. And I think probably, I mean, I don't know if Tom would have any issue with that. I mean, I would be okay with that because the rezoning itself wouldn't be, finalized really until that plat combined the lots, which it could be an administrative plat because it's just basically taking 4 lots and making them one. So it's a pretty simple, I mean, it's a huge piece of property survey, obviously, but it's a simple plat.
So Alderman, I think if you want to amend your motion to add point 2, that ordinance 2104, the 4 lots associated with the rezoning must be combined through a plat, and the rezoning would not be effective until after those lots are combined, then I think we could make that amended motion. Between now and second reading, we will get with Mr. Hale and make sure we got the exact language that we need for second reading. But I think if that's the intent of the board, we can do that.
Okay, and just so I can, because I made the original motion, I'll want clarity on the first part of that, because on the Planning Commission approved up to 100 of the total permitted dwelling units could be attached. And I know that that's about 35%. Would you be comfortable with me saying up to 35% of the total number of permitted dwelling units could be attached? Would you be comfortable with that?
I think the reason that we went with 100 is because there's a definite number. It's easy for us. It's easy for the applicant to know exactly the number of lots or house lots that can be attached. It's a little easier than getting subjective on percentages, depending on what if they came back and added 3 more lots here or 2 more lots here. Is it open space lots? Those kind of things. So we just wanted to be very clear on the number of dwelling units.
You triggered me now, David, because I remember a BZA thing that there was a BZA issue that's similar to this. Okay, never mind. I got you. We need the numbers.
I'm
The
comfortable
number
leaving
is
it
much
100.
more concrete. Yeah, they're going to max out their what they can build as far as the 286 because of the property's value. So they're 100 is definitely more clear.
Okay.
This is Alderman Pinchot. On their concept drawing there, they showed 90 lots were attached. I mean, if you're concerned about the 100, you could even drop it to 90.
Then we're turning this into a negotiation, I feel like.
All right, leave it. I'm good at leaving it at 100. I just wanted to point that out.
I disagree. I think David made a statement earlier. It was up to us to do that. If I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm comfortable with up to 100. I'm comfortable with that language, but I don't understand why we would quibble over 10 units.
It's Alderman Pinchot. I agree.
I'm comfortable with it now. The explanation of the percentage makes sense. So the 100 makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor, you want to go ahead and do your amendment, please?
Yeah, so I'm going to amend it, the second one, prior to zoning is not effective until after the 4 lots are combined. David had the language, but that's essentially who seconded that? I think Scott had seconded that.
Second. Alderman Meyer second, I guess. I still haven't got all my sleep caught up from our last meeting. Sorry.
That was really
Was it wrong? Okay. Then Alderman Pinchot needs to second.
Somebody's mic is still on. There's a lot of feedback. I can't hear what everybody's saying.
It's Ron, I amended the motion, and whoever seconded the motion needs to second my amended motion. I believe Scott Meyer seconded my motion. So he needs to second my amended motion.
And I think I did too, but I'm so freaking tired from our last meeting, I can't remember. So I'm going to second it just in case I seconded it the first time, but I'm pretty sure I seconded it. So I second your amendment, Vice Mayor. Thank you.
So are we ready for a vote?
So we'll need a vote on that motion. Correct.
Yeah, on the amended motion, please, Alice.
Alderman Burnett.
Alderman Burnett, yes.
Alderman Meyer.
Alderman Meyer, yes.
Alderman Pinchot.
Alderman Pinchot, yes.
Alderman Pavlin.
Alderman Pavlin, yes.
Mayor Williams.
Mayor Williams, yes. Okay, Do we need to go back and do a second vote, David?
No, sir, since the original person making the motion and the original person
Okay.
seconding the motion amended it, then you're good with just the one vote.
Okay, then let the record show that ordinance 21-04 has been approved on the first reading.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, next will be the town administrator's report. David?
Mayor, thank you. I know a lot of times people, we talked about the CAFR earlier, and there's always a lot of numbers in the CAFR that you have to sift through. But one of the funner ones is when people want to ask, how much is the town of Farragut worth? If I wanted to go buy it, how much is it going to cost me to buy the town of Farragut? And what I'd tell you was you should have bought it 10 years ago when it was at a great price of $2.7 billion to buy. Because now 10 years later, we just upped that ante to 3.7 billion. So it's a pretty good number of growth that we've had over the last 10 years. That's obviously shown through the tax records and through our CAFR. So if you're interested in that number, it's on page 88 of the CAFR. I don't know if anybody listened on Monday night. Governor Lee had his State of the State address. One of the big things that he mentioned that he is going to be requesting as part of the budget process is $200 million to go toward local government grants for infrastructure improvements to their communities. It'd be one-time money. We certainly hope that that goes through the process of the legislature and gets approved. We have many projects that we have planned for next year. I know we'll be getting into that with the board during our capital investment program discussions, but certainly that will help quite a bit in getting us jump started into next year. The allocation the original allocation they have is around $550,000 for Farragut, and certainly through our budget process and discussions, we'll be discussing ways to utilize those dollars. Also, just a bit of sad news. We have got one of our long-term employees, Scott Brewer, who has been with us for 31 years, is moving on from us. Tomorrow will be his last day. We certainly wish Scott well. He started off in the Public Works Department and as a maintenance worker, moved up to foreman, and then moved over to the engineering department about a decade or so ago as an engineering technician. So we're going to miss Scott and miss his work here, and wish him the best though in his future endeavors. Finally, the legislature is back in session. I know they had the special session a couple weeks ago. Now they're back in session with their normal legislative duties for this past week. We'll certainly be monitoring a lot of legislation that's ongoing right now and could impact local governments. So as things come up and develop, I will certainly let the board know about that. With that, that's all I have to report tonight.
David, this is Alderman Pinchuk. We still on for our retreat on the 19th, correct?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay, David, thank you. If you get a chance, everybody, to speak with your one of your senators or your House members, please ask them for their continued support, particularly on the when it comes to the one-time money that David was talking about. We could sure use that in infrastructure. So, okay, from there, with no other discussion, we'll move on to citizens forum. Pursuant to the governor's current executive order, we ask that all Farragut citizens' comments be emailed to comments@townoffarragut.org, which must, along with their name and address, be received by 12 p.m. the day prior to the meeting to be included in the record of that night's meeting. They must also abide by the public forum protocol to be read into the record. And now I will ask the town reporter to please read in all eligible questions and comments with a 5-minute limit on each subject, please.
Yes, sir. We have one tonight. It's Claudia Ritchie at 736 Brooksworth. She says, I'm opposed to the planned apartments being constructed so near the Farragut schools. There's already a traffic problem in that area during school drop-offs and pickups, and during work-ending shifts. With so many new subdivisions recently built and in the planning stages, that will increase the number of cars and students in the area. Also, there's already a drainage problem in the area causing flooding of the roads during the rainy season. More blacktop and roofs won't help. Farragut is a family town. Do you really want to look like Cedar Bluff? Be an extension of the city of Knoxville. I don't. Please consider the public's opinion. Thank you. And that's all of our comments tonight.
Okay, thank you, Allison. As far as that particular citizen's comment, please understand that we are looking at all the concerns that you have as far as the drainage, the traffic, and the school situation. So rest assured, we're looking at that. It's not something that's brand new with us. It's something that's been looked at prior to any mention to the town center at Biddle Farms. So at that point, unless we have some other report by one of the aldermen, if not, without objection, February 11th, 2021 Target Board Mayor and Alderman meeting is now complete and adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you all.
Everyone.
Good night.